Welcome to the Pen by Design podcast, helping authors learn the latest strategies and resources to become successful creative entrepreneurs. I'm your humble host, Destiny Jordan. So let's get writing, writers. So every creator eventually hits the same moment. Tools don't work, the system breaks, and you have to choose quit or build something better. Today's guest chose to build. Amber Parks is the founder of Writing with Design, a writing framework born not from theory, but from necessity. When the writing programs available couldn't help her students think, create, and communicate with confidence, she designed her own. She's taught around the world, scaled a classroom solution into a national program, and believes writing isn't just academic skill, it's a foundation for leadership, creativity, and impact. So let's get into it. So today we have Amber Parks, but the first things first, for those who don't know, who is Amber Parks?
For me to take on?
Yes.
Okay. Who am I? Why do I get to be here? Well, first of all, I'm so honored to be here, Destiny. Thank you so much for having me on. And so I think the best way to describe me is I am a classroom teacher at heart and forever. So I always knew I wanted to be a teacher from the time I was tiny. That's what I played when I was little. And so when I finally got my own classroom, it was a dream come true. And what I realized very quickly is that it didn't matter where I was teaching, if it was in the States, if it was overseas. Anytime we had to write, my students would say, "Oh, do we have to? And how long does it have to be?" And kind of looking back at my life, it was my love of writing that allowed me to go to college completely on scholarship. And so that to me was why I love to write. It opened doors for me. It allowed me to kind of better understand myself, to learn, to process, and honestly, to win enough scholarships to make college a reality for me. So I knew it had that potential, and I wanted my students to feel the same way. So by connecting the dots between my love of writing and also my degree in deaf and hard of hearing education, I started to make some little strategies and ideas, and not just tell my students we need to write now, but say, okay, let's take these building blocks of sentences and let's make something out of that. And, let's take all these neat phrases and how can we rearrange them? And so we made writing more engaging and more step-by-step, and it really caught on. And then that spread to a neighboring school. And then I was asked to come talk to another school in another district, and it just grew from there. And so I've had a really incredible journey of always feeling connected to classrooms, even as I stepped out of it, because I started to work with teachers, and we would sit around, I like to call them jelly bean tables. They've got lots of names, but to me, they're always a jelly bean table. And we would sit around and just talk strategies and talk ideas. And then that has grown very, very literally page by page into what we now have as Writing with Design. So my job now is founder and director of Writing with Design, where I travel the country, work with schools on helping writing become something that teachers and students both enjoy, from pre-K all the way up through high school. And so I pinch myself that I get to do what I do and really instill that love of learning with everyone I meet.
Number one, that's amazing. Also, you said you have a degree in deaf and hard of hearing.
Yes. Yeah. So I have a dual degree in elementary and special education from Vanderbilt. Shout out to my alma mater. And so yeah, my special ed degree, my emphasis area was in deaf and hard of hearing. So I worked with children who were profoundly deaf, who only knew American Sign Language, all the way up to children who had cochlear implants. So it's a complete range of hearing skills, of signing skills, of lip reading, of kind of all of the pieces that go into how children with all these degrees of hearing loss learn, and also what they are willing to learn. So for example, American Sign Language, it's part of the capital D deaf culture, and the deaf culture does not look at being deaf as a disability. It is, they consider themselves like a different population of people. And so there is no reason for them to learn how to kind of vocalize in ways that don't just happen naturally for them. Or there's not a reason for them to learn ways to sign like all the pieces of spoken and written English. And so that's a really fascinating world to kind of enter into and honor and respect everything about their culture, and then also help with the academic skill of written English to say, yes, we're not imposing on your culture. And if for writing, these are important parts, right? So that's actually where a lot of our lessons came from initially, was how do we teach like another language, a written language to profoundly deaf children. And so one of our activities where we label for vocabulary and we talk about verb tense and we talk about articles and kind of all the little brick and mortar words of English, that activity was truly born out of wanting to respect the American Sign Language as their primary language, but also build in what was needed to convert that into a written response anytime they needed to do that.
That's amazing. Also, shout out to Phil's special ed teacher.
Yeah. We make the world go round, don't we?
Very true, but I have not yet had a conversation with those that have worked extensively with the deaf culture. I've only had a few instances of working with the culture, but I'm like, I just love to have that in-depth, how that shaped how you viewed writing, while making it accessible to really all children.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely.
That's so cool. And so with the program Writing with Design, why do you feel like that's necessary? What has it done to change your outlook on writing?
Yeah, I think we set out to solve really a cultural problem, right? A school culture problem where writing is something that just gets assigned. And that is not a fault of teachers. I reflect every time I'm in a school would I put my own children with this teacher. And truly, Destiny, I can count on one hand, out of working with schools now in writing with design capacity for 15 years, and then plus my teaching career, close to 25 years, I can count literally on one hand the number of teachers that I would say, no, my children would not be in their classroom, right? Meaning there are absolutely phenomenal people in our schools, teachers and administrators. I mean, from in every state that I go to. And so what I really why I bring that up is that there's a hunger and there's a want to teach writing well, and there just hasn't been the focus on it. And so what we really set out to do was to make writing manageable and doable for teachers, and then ultimately for students because of that. And so I like to say, we when we think about treating writing like we do other subjects, we realize how far we need to come. You would never hear a teacher say, all right, just get out a sheet of paper and I want you to math about anything you want. You can math for 20 minutes, just math. I mean, the students will look around like, what's going on? Did we miss something? Like, what are we supposed to math about? And it just makes it feel so daunting, right? Or to go into a science lab and just say, okay, well, there's some chemicals and there's a Bunsen burner and just play around, just science, hopefully you'll keep your eyebrows. Like, no, we don't do that to students. We give them processes and structures and procedures. And that doesn't take away from the scientific discovery, right? Having a set of math problems doesn't mean that some kids learn math better than others. It actually helps them all see, do I understand, right? And for teachers to say, whoa, I see a pattern here. We've missed the same type of problem 3 times. Now I know what I need to go back and work on with this group of students. So there is power in structure and there's power in processes. And we use that across all the other areas of academic learning, right? Even you look at phonics, we don't just say, okay, you can look at a letter B and come up with whatever sound you want. No, there is a sound that letter makes, right? And so that same idea, we just have brought it into writing to say, yeah, of course we want to unleash students' creativity. We want them to think of words that make their stories their own. But we got to start with the structure. We've got to start with the steps that really help students learn how to tap into that. So I like to say we teach the steps, the structures, and the style to make writing manageable and doable and really enjoyable.
That is amazing. And so in your making of this program, did you ever see yourself making a national program based on writing?
Yeah. No, I really didn't. I mean, it was called Amber's Writing for a long time, actually. And I thought that kind of sounds egoic, and I'm really not. It's not me. It's definitely not about me. And so, that's just what the teachers kind of latched onto whenever we would sit down and work together. They just say, oh, we need more from Amber. We need to talk to her more about writing. And so it just became, Amber's writing. So that's really every single thing, every single step has been built by teachers and students. And I just am the one fortunate enough, and I guess passionate enough is another way. One way to think about it is to kind of pull it all together. Maybe crazy enough too. I don't know, but to kind of pull it all together, because taking these ideas and then grappling with then how can we those were a lot of good ideas that we just sat around and planned. But then what's the sequence? How should we walk students through this? And will it work for teachers in California like it does for teachers in Texas? Or does it work for students in 4th grade like it does for students in 2nd grade? How do we need to change it up? And so to kind of grapple with how do we make this more accessible for teachers? How do we put it together in a way that shows reverence to teachers and what they're doing, and also makes it certainly applicable and usable. That's been a big piece that I have been honored to be tasked with over the past 15 years. So yeah, I really set out to just work with teachers, to work with students, and I just have been, it's been such a journey to get to travel the country and work, and it keeps spreading, right? It keeps growing in different pockets. And one thing I wanted to share on that too is I can tell you exactly where I was. It was Pinconning Middle School in Pinconning, Michigan, which is one of my favorite places to have ever gone in this country. It's a very rural community, about an hour and a half north of Detroit. And I remember this was very early on. I was one of the first districts I had the honor of working with, and a middle schooler looked at me with some of the material that I was teaching, and he said, this doesn't work for me. The way that the structure was set up for a paragraph, this doesn't make sense to me. I see it this way. And I looked at him and I said, you know what? You're right. Thank you for saying that. Thank you for talking us through about how the structure didn't make sense to you and what needed to change. And I said to him, you just created a year of work for me. And as I patted him on the back, and I said, look, I'm not being hyperbolic. I'm being serious, but thank you. You have just changed this in an incredible way. And so I think that's the neat thing about, and the magical thing about writing with design, is that it's been built by and for students and teachers. So it just keeps getting better.
That's amazing. And I really love how it's like you receive the input to make the needed changes.
Yes, I couldn't. It's like once you do learn a strategy, or once you do learn a better way, you can't unsee it, right? When you know better, you do better, right? Maya Angelou, it's just one of my favorite ways of thinking about the world, is that, we can wish and want we have now 10 years ago. We all do, right? But to stand in that moment with that student and honor his bravery, honor his involvement in what we were doing, and then to honor his voice, to say, I really don't see it that way. He's an instrumental part of what now is in the binders.
That's amazing. So could you give us a kind of a breakdown of what it would look like? Because you said it goes from elementary to high school. So how does it fluctuate going to those 3 major developments of writing?
Right. Yeah. So, I love to say that when we work with teachers in pre-K and kinder, we know we're getting students who are picking up pencils for the very first time. And so I like to clarify, we are not a handwriting program. We don't have proper letter formation as part of our framework, because we're more on the composition. So I want to honor that is a critical piece. We want handwriting to be something that teachers and schools prioritize and focus on. But what we want to work on, and where we filled a gap, because I feel like there are a lot of tremendous, great programs out there for that, is how do you get kids to write? How do you get kindergartners to have that confidence and voice to share their ideas? And so we start very early on with both picture and sentences. And with the picture, we're looking for detail. So this is something that anyone listening can take back. And if you work with young children, or you work with students with special needs who are more who need those illustrations as a way to communicate more of their message, then look for details in the setting and in the characters. And we mean the finer details. Like if they're drawing about springtime, we want little tiny buds of flowers sticking out, not big blooms of flowers, right? They're just starting, they're just peeking out. Or if the grass has been mowed in one part and not the other of the yard, things like that kind of help us say, oh yeah, these are the details that you're picking up on. We have a picture in our binder of a UPS driver arriving at a house, and there's lug nuts on the wheels of the truck, right? And the brass brown, right? UPS definitely gets the brown marker out. And so, we joke that we all know it's the UPS truck because of the color. So, those types of details in the picture, in the setting, and then in the characters are really critical. So can we tell height, or can we tell who it is by the height in the picture, or the finer details of an expression on the face, not just a smile, but are they excited? How do you know that? Or do they have earrings on? The much finer details. And then we work on formation of a sentence. And we don't just start off with conventional spelling and super robust sentences. We start off with just getting initial sounds of the words, and then final sounds of the words, and then those middle sounds. And what that allows students to do is develop their confidence. I don't have to know how to spell everything. I can still get my ideas down. So we start literally from the start of drawings and writing, and move into sentence level work. That takes us into kind of, certainly in kinder, but first, second, third, we do a lot of sentence into what we call our starter essays. So we teach essays with the minimum number of sentences possible to start off, which is 6. So we teach a 1-sentence opening, a 1-sentence closing, and then 2 body paragraphs of 2 sentences each. And what that does as a blueprint is it lets students have everything they need for an essay without the overwhelm of, I got to write 20 sentences. So with our very tight essay structure, they develop the skill set to know, when do I change my paragraphs? What's the difference between an opening and a body paragraph? Are my opening and closing the exact same thing? And spoiler alert, they're not. They're not just a restatement in the closing of the opening, right? There's a different need for it, right? Different purpose. So it's starting from the very first time students pick up their pencil, to knowing how to form sentences, to knowing how sentences then can create paragraphs and into essays. And where we go with our middle school and high school ultimately is into much longer pieces, where we build the length when the quality is there. So that's what I really want to hone in on here, is that I just talked through length, and yes, length matters, right? We do need students to know how to write longer pieces. But one of the biggest things a myth that I like to say we break is that we teach teachers and students that length does not equal quality. And we want our high schoolers, we want our middle schoolers to know how to write a 3-sentence response that knocks our socks off, rather than 3 pages of just fluff, right? We would much rather have that. So we take that feeling of, I'm not a good writer because I can't write a lot, and we say, look, that might be the best thing, right? There's an art to brevity, and there's a need for it. And so let's focus on that here before we stretch to a length that makes everyone overwhelmed and turns people off from writing. So we use levels so that there is this consistency of how we approach. So short answer responses, essays, we have levels that we call them, rather than a grade level attached to it. So it just allows us to move through the links much easier. So that was a lot, but I think really kind of hits on how we use what our blueprints, our levels of structure, we call it, in writing with design, so that teachers can choose a level, students can find a level that fits for them or that's needed for the prompt, and then we always know we can grow into more.
Well, that was like a great explanation. And I also had a question on when you said brevity against the fluff.
Oh, yes.
So that's a lot for the school writing community, brevity and fluff. So you're going towards the brevity and not fluff.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, I will never forget the day I had this sweet little girl, Savannah was her name. She came running into my classroom. I was teaching 4th grade at the time, running in, and she said, Mrs. Parks, I wrote 4 pages. And she handed it over, and she was just beaming, so proud. And I started reading it, and it said, we went outside. I said to Gloria, do you want to go down the slide? She said yes. I said, do you want to go on the swing? She said yes. I said, do you want to go play on the concrete? She said yes. It was just nonstop question and answer, Q&A all the way down. And I at that moment was not the time to instruct her on that, and I just oohed and awed over it with her. But in my mind, I'm thinking, okay, we got to address, how do we do really strong dialogue? And let's work on not having length equal quality. What can I do with this student, with all of my students, to help them understand that length is not what we need in terms of becoming a great writer, so that she could be just as proud when she wrote 4 sentences as she was when she wrote 4 pages. So yeah, I like to say we do like a name that tune approach to writing, so that, like if you can write it in 4 sentences instead of 5, and then you think you can write it in 3 instead of 4, write that response, right? Like, how short can we get it, rather than trying to just fill up a page thinking, well, that's what my teacher wants. Let me just start at the top and keep writing till I get to the last line, or write the end really large so it fills up, the last half of the page, whatever tricks we've got to kind of feel like we've written more than we have. Let's move away from that and let's work on, what are we really saying? What goes into these sentences? How can we make them stronger so that we're not just filling up pages for the sake of doing that and thinking that it's writing, because it's not.
True. How do you break that myth when students come to you with that, trying to write 1,001 words and you only need 50?
Yeah. I mean, I think part of it is a huge, well, let me say it differently. I think one way to do that is just to give them that a range that feels crazy, especially the older the student, right? If they're so used to, whether it's at the college level or at the high school level, and they're just so used to 5 pages of writing, and we say, no. American Idol's on tonight, right? I don't have time to read all your writing. You only get 10 sentences, or you only get 5 sentences, whatever is like a complete 180 from where the assignments have landed for them for a very long time. That's such a wake up for students. Oh, wait, what? So how can we first, as teachers, start to break that myth? I think that's a huge kind of step for teachers to consider, is I'm the one who decides what the length is here. And because there is not a standard in any state that says a writing needs to be X number of sentences or pages long. That has all been implanted by curriculum companies, or by the syllabi that teachers are doing, or because my colleague that came before me, that's just the way it was, and that I've just kept it going. All merited reasons, right? We've all got these influences that help us kind of gauge what length we need and so on. But when I teach teachers that we do 1 sentence opening and closing paragraphs, some of them have to hold on to the seat. What do you mean 1 sentence? That's not a paragraph. Actually, a word can be a paragraph. I mean, there's not these rules that we think exist, right? We don't have to have 5 sentences in every paragraph and a neat and tidy 5-paragraph essay. No, that is completely an artificial construct. So by switching out of that, and teachers really thinking, what am I looking for, right? What do I need in this response? And thinking through the response like a blueprint. Like, there's a blueprint for every Walmart that's built in this country. But I guarantee you I shouldn't say guarantee. I don't know this for sure, but every Walmart I go into, I have to learn it, right? It doesn't matter what city I'm in. I'm like, oh, okay, wait, their produce is that way. And gosh, their toy section's up front, and my store is at the back. It's different. And that's what I love about the blueprint analogy, is it's not formulaic. We're not teaching kids one way, but we're saying to teachers, like, think about what you need in your response, and then give students that as the focus rather than an arbitrary page number. And what we find is that generally it needs to be a lot shorter. And what that will also do is it takes the pressure valve off students, because if they aren't feeling like writing's their favorite thing, or their writing hasn't scored well, then it allows for instruction and for kind of quality control to happen at a much more manageable scale and amount, rather than trying to fix an entire essay. If we can look at 3 sentences, 4 sentences, 10 sentences instead of 50 or 500, or it is so much more manageable for us to give feedback and to give kind of the next steps to boost their writing and thinking skills. So I think it starts with teachers, and then I think it also, one last thing is, it shouldn't be attached to grade level. That's one of the things we start with, a 1 level response, and we go up to multi-paragraph. And when I teach that, I say our level 1 writing is not less than a level 2. it's a level 1 writing should be impressive if it's in kindergarten or it's in AP English. And a level 1 writing should be happening in both classes, right? Yes, we want more length. We wouldn't ask our kindergartners to write multi-paragraph essays, but we do need to be asking our AP English students to be writing 1-sentence responses. So it's a growing of length rather than I don't write those short answer responses anymore. I don't write less than 50 sentences for a response. Why? That doesn't make any sense.
I love your thinking when it comes to level writing, because I guess we know it's fed background. Everyone comes in at different levels. So it's hard to say in 6th grade, we are all writing in paragraphs where some of us we haven't been to school for a while. And some of us, we just got here.
Exactly. So yeah. And that's, that's honestly, Destiny, that's where it came from. For me, is that nothing in writing with design is by grade level. Because I didn't want there to be any stigma, because you're right. When those 6th graders walk in, they already know, they have that feeling inside them that I am not on grade level. And so the last thing I want to do is pull something out where I didn't white it out, where it says 1st grade on it, right? I don't want there to be a stigma attached to length. I want there to be, I want their writing to be judged for the quality first. And that matters way more. So we like to say, length happens naturally when students are confident in what they want to say. And that's the truth. When they have that confidence of, I know what I need to say, and I need more sentences to get it down, that's way different than how long does it have to be? And let me just fill up a page and find a way to just cycle through my ideas over and over, or write larger, or or a space between my paragraphs, all the things that I can do to just take up more space. We want writing to be something that students, whether or not they love it, that's not the goal. Although I do want them to love it, but if they still don't love it, at least to feel like I can do this and I enjoy it because I know how to put it together. I know how to compose a blueprint. I know how to structure my writing and get my ideas down.
That is amazing. So you created Writing with Design because the tools you needed for your students just didn't exist at the time. And for even writers listening, that kind of sounds familiar. You have a book you may have that doesn't exist and you think should be out there, or etc. But how did that moment shift for you to come from a teacher to a creator? How did that shift go?
Oh, that's a great question. I think it was because when I talked with colleagues, they would say, we all would agree when we read a piece that it was a really strong piece of writing. Like, oh, that student's doing really well with writing. Great. This student's really not doing well with writing when we read the next piece, right? We were aligned with what quality looked like in writing. But then they would just go back and assign more writing. And that isn't helping. That's just letting the good ones, quote unquote, right? The good ones, the strong writers, just practice more of what they're already doing. But it's also letting the habits of the ones who are not great writers keep practicing that as well. So what are great writers doing? Whether they're in 4th grade, whether they're a published novelist, right? Whether it's a Mo Willems or a Faulkner, like what do they do? How do we break down their writing? And I think that's my gift. That's my knack, is that I look at the structural components of writing, whether it's on the piece level or it's across kind of in the big kind of bigger swaths of student writing or professional writing. I look for what are replicatable structures for content or sentence structure, or how to put together closings and openings. And that really is what led to this becoming more than just me sitting around and giving ideas. It's what really took it to a framework and made it teachable and made it something that is shareable and scalable in schools. So, for example, we have 13 criteria. Lucky 13. Taylor Swift and I, we saw the magic in the number, I like to say. So we have 13 criteria, and they're not things like voice and organization. Give me a break. How do you teach that? How do you teach voice to kids? And you say, put more voice into your writing. What are they supposed to speak into their writing? What does that mean, right? And so what we looked at is, okay, pieces who have scored well on voice. What do they have in it? Well, they have sophisticated word choice for one, right? They use words like yanked instead of pulled, right? There's selection of words that is empowering, right? And that takes refinement of vocabulary. That's really important. So we know sophisticated word choice at the word and phrase level really matters. Secondly, believe it or not, it's transitional words and phrases. That's one of the key pieces of voice. And as we looked at high scoring pieces across the country, again, didn't matter, SAT writing or fourth grade state assessments, didn't matter. What we noticed is that high scoring pieces have a transitional word or phrase in almost, you're not going to believe this, every single sentence. Every single sentence. And we're not talking first in, next, last, and finally, right? Those are the megaphone transitions. We're talking about once the birds were awake or after 15 minutes. Right? The phrases that move the writing along but are so subtle that they're not the megaphones. They're not the ones that just are so easy to spot. But those two alone, when teachers focus on sophisticated word choice, and one quick tip on that, for example, is we have a rule in Writing with Design that adjectives cannot touch the period. Because that's what students love to do, right? They love to say the ball is blue, right? Or the dog is friendly, right? They put adjectives at the end of a sentence, and what that does is it truncates sentences. It naturally makes them so much shorter. So we have a rule: adjectives may not touch the period. So even if they say something like the dog is a friendly pet, that is already giving us more. But if we say, okay, move friendly in front, the friendly dog, what? Wagged its tail at me. Okay, now we've already added so much more into the writing. So when we know that teachers work on sophisticated word choice, yes, adjectives. So I gave you a tip on that one for sure. And then the transitional words and phrases. When those two alone are worked on, the quality of the sentences that students put together grows. So the 13 criteria is just one example of how we've kind of taken it from, okay, we know we can read good writing. We can all agree this one's stronger, this one's not. But how? How do we get our students to get more like the ones who are doing it well? And so I feel like I kind of tap into the minds and the processes of writers and help build steps and strategies that teachers and students, and quite frankly, anyone who's writing, can tap into and pull from and utilize to improve any words they put on the page.
Well, look at that. You just ran into my next question, because my next question was many writers, adults and kids, believe writing is a talent. So what has your work taught you about the skill versus just having innate talent?
Ooh. Okay. I have so many thoughts on this, but I'm going to start here with my favorite quotation from Steve Graham, who is the mega researcher attached to all the research about the science of writing. Science of reading has really exploded, as it should. And I wish there was also, and there is starting to be more of a focus on science of literacy and writing being a part of that. So Steve Graham has been doing incredible research on his own with his wife, Karen Harris, with other incredible professors and researchers. And then also he's done these meta-analyses of what's already out there. What do we already know to be true about writing? And one of the things that when I heard it, it truly gave me goosebumps, and it has stuck with me. It's so simple, yet it's so profound. He said, writing is thinking on paper. That's it. Writing is thinking on paper. And that, first of all, can kind of stop us in our tracks of like, oh, mercy, if this is what's flowing through my students' heads, or like we got a lot of work to do. But that's also so powerful to harness. That is truly what writing is. It's thinking on paper. So how can we cultivate our students' thinking, both on the content and then also on word choice and sentence structure and organization and kind of all these key pieces? So that quote really affirmed for me that writing is definitely a learned skill set. And that, yes, I think there are natural aptitudes to all kinds of skill sets, right? I mean, for example, I could work with a voice coach for the next 15 years. And I am my voice might sound a little better than it does, when I think I like to joke and say I have a voice for the shower, right? I love to sing, but it's not pretty. So I could learn more, and I could get better. I am never going to be a Beyonce, right? That's just not, that's not for me. And yet I can hone the skill, right? But for me, writing is, it lives in both worlds, right? It is an artistic talent, right? I firmly believe there are people who are born to be writers, 1,000%, and they have a gift, and that's an incredible gift, really, to the world, right? Beyond to just themselves. But I also feel like it is an academic skill, right? It lives in both worlds, and so because of the academic skill set, it allows us to really cultivate. Same kind of thing, like natural born singers, right? You've heard me talk about American Idol already. I love that show. I love that show because it's people who come in who have maybe never sang anywhere else, literally than church, or just to themselves, to their babies, to just their family, and then they hear something and they're able to cultivate and grow that skill, right? So I know I'm going a lot because that was such a great question, but I think I definitely honor that people have natural gifts and talents, and writing can certainly be one of those. And I think there's a big ol' and that it also is a set of skills that can very much be taught and be honed and be something that students and any of us can learn so that we can become stronger with it. And maybe not be a published writer by the end of the day, but be able to communicate very clearly in an email, to tell a phenomenal story that wins me a scholarship, to be able to take on my schoolwork and know that I can handle the writing and not try to find a way out of that or have that pit in my stomach. And that's truly, I hope, an inspirational message to everyone that writing is a set of learned skills, and it's there for the cultivation by how we hone our thinking.
I love it. I love how you said how we hone our thinking. So a lot of this sounds like before you even get the pen to the page or pencil to the page or type your way through, you have to think about it before you write about it.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's, yeah. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
I said, no, you go ahead.
I was going to say, and that's just where it can be teachable, right? Because at the heart of learning, it is cultivation of thinking and making connections. And so whether it's learning how to put words together in a sentence, or coming back and saying, I don't like how that sounds, and having strategies of how do I rearrange my sentences, all of that is very teachable. And that's one thing that I just was in the airport the other day in Colorado Springs, and I had a lot of material with me. So I was trying to finagle in my bags to make sure I was under my 50-pound limit. And the check-in agents were so kind of, what is this? And I said, this is a student writer's guide that I wrote for students. Would you all like one? Because I think it'll get me under my limit on the weight. And so I handed it to one of them, and then another one asked for it, and they were flipping through them, and there wasn't a line, I promise. They were doing their job, but it was a slow time, and they just said, I wish I had this. I wish I had had this when I was writing. And that's the kind of affirmation of we have to make writing more doable, more teachable, demystify what feels like you either have it or you don't, because it is teachable. There are steps to it. And when we unleash that, when we teach students this, and anyone, the steps and structures and strategies, then they find their voice. Literally, they find their voice in writing.
Love it. And I just love how how you put it together, that writing is not this scary thing to conquer. It's something that you can attack piece by piece until you find your way through it, your own way through it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's it. Yeah, it's not a paint by number, we're not wanting cookie cutter pieces. But there is still a structure. There's still a process to every famous painter. And that's what we're doing with the writing process. Like, what are our options? How can we show all the different choices for students to think about, for any writer to kind of study? And that's what I would encourage anyone who loves, who writes, right? Whether you love it, or you feel like it's your calling, or it's not your calling, but you have to do it. If you study the structure of pieces that move you, what do they do? What types of sentences? So I mean things like, do they have a story? Do they pull in direct quotation? Where is that transitional phrase? Is it at the front? Is it at the end? Is that a complex sentence? Is that a compound, complex subject? What do they do structurally in their writing that makes you sit up, that makes you listen, that makes you you can't put the book down, or you can't stop the audiobook? What is it about it structurally that you can tie into your own piece, or learn to weave in and pull into your own writing? And that's really at the heart of all of our resources and activities, is saying, look, we know what great writing looks like and sounds like, and we're going to show you step-by-step ways of doing that in all the parts, from the idea generation phase all the way up to the refinement piece before you submit it.
I like how you have levels that help kind of build their confidence before you get to that multi-paragraph situation.
Mm-hmm.
So with writing with design, so it emphasizes, you have emphasized process over your perfection. So you really want kids to understand the process. So why is that mindset important for writers to rebuild confidence?
Because writing is thinking on paper, because it is that grappling and that grit that all great writers have. I was just in classrooms earlier this past week, and I opened up with asking students, how many of you feel like writing's hard? And they kind of look at each other, and then they kind of slowly raise their hand up. And I'm like, I'm going to shoot my hand up as high as I can. Writing is hard. And I write every day, and I write with students all over the country, and I love it. And it's hard for me. And so that just honoring that there is grit and grappling that every writer feels, I hope is affirmation. And that's where we want teachers to model the process. We want them to when I say model the process, they model that. I can't think of the right word here, right? We don't just put up a writing and everything's just flowing smoothly for us. We want teachers to write organically with their students and plan their writings collectively, to really honor that there is so much active thinking and processing happening. And we don't like for students to erase, for example. We want them just to put a strike through, just a line through the word, not even scribble out. That's too much. One line through it and keep on going. Or when you read your piece over and over and you think, oh, this is just not landing well. When that word revision comes into play, cross it out and put the new words around it. We have to honor the mess of writing. And I mean that very lovingly. There is a messy process to deep thinking, and writing is, to me, the pinnacle of deep thinking. And so that the more that teachers can model that, the more that writers can share that with their audiences of like, yeah, let me show you how this whole chapter got completely rewritten because I realized this one thing didn't make sense between these two characters. That type of openness to the process demystifies it for students and for all of us. I can't tell you how many times when I go to classes and I say, like, how, to students, and I ask them, how do you write before they've worked with us? And they just, well, we go to the computer and I start typing. I'm like, really? Wow. There's so much thinking and organizing and grappling with that we need to do to get a great response. And so I really do think that most students feel like I sit down at the computer, I open up a Word doc, I choose a font that's really pretty or curly or really cursive-y that no one else is going to be able to read, or I type it in yellow, right? Gosh, I've seen it all. And then they just start going, and then that's their writing. And so what we do in Writing with Design Schools is when teachers share students' writing out in the hallway, or if there's a student-led conference and students are sharing their work, they show their designs, they show the pages of process and organization and revision work before they get to their sentence draft. to honor, yeah, there's all this thinking. This is what you need to see I did, not just the finished piece that's typed and pretty and looks like it's so easy for me. It's not. Show the whole process.
That so you see all the mess before you see the great product at the end.
Yeah. Yeah. And for teachers too. I mean, there's so many teachers who look at me and like, you want me to do what? Yes. You gotta have words up there because it's organically happening for you. You don't have it pre-planned. You're coming up with an idea and then a student's giving you a better idea, or you're realizing that you kind of strayed off and you got to cross it off and come back into the topic. That's what we want. We have to model that, or students don't ever see that that's what's going to happen for them. So teachers really have a huge model or a huge role in modeling for students every part of that process to affirm for them that some kids don't got it and some got it. We all got it, and we're going to grow our skill sets to get better at it.
That's amazing, especially for teachers being organic. Have you had any pushback against that?
Yes, I have. But I think because I model it too in the trainings and we work on writing together in the trainings, and they see me in their classrooms modeling where I'm stumbling over my words and I'm thinking like, I can't think of what I want to say here. I'm going to leave that right now and come back to it and move on to the next part of the writing that we're planning. Then teachers feel like they get a green light to do it themselves. So I think that's one of the most powerful things of me getting to work with schools, is to affirm for teachers that it's okay. It's okay to be stuck and not know where you want to go and say, you know what? We're all out of ideas right now. I can't think of anything. None of us are coming up with exactly what we want there. Let's just put a pin in it and let's move on to something else that we need to work on. And that's organic writing. That's true writing. I mean, very few authors sit down and just churn out an entire book or report or whatever it is they need to do in one sitting. It is months, if not years, of collective work that ultimately gets to the publishing place. And I think we don't do enough of that. The first part of the process for students, we're too focused on round and round of revision of the final draft, where it's honestly at that point, it's done. Like that's it. When it's in sentence draft, we tell teachers, all you're looking for are minor edits in terms of like capitals and spelling and easy fixes. If you have to overhaul a third of it, if this student is completely off prompt, you've missed the instructional time. It's gone. You got to look forward and plan better next time, and plan with how we work with writing, with our structures, with our blueprints. Students will design their writing, not in an outline, through one of our visual designs for essays. They kind of plan out the structure of their writing, and teachers can assess everything on there in terms of quality, in terms of organization, in terms of even the different types of sentences. Do they have direct quotations? Are they pulling in strong analysis? Do they have a counterclaim? Whatever they need for that writing, teachers can assess all of that when it's still in phrases and fragments in their design. And then we have teachers say, okay, now you're ready to write your sentence draft. And so when that sentence draft is put together, when students put all that effort into taking their ideas and put it into sentences, then teachers have very little work to do at that point. It's much more enjoyable. And then students are open to it as well, to say, oh yeah, I totally forgot to capitalize that. It's much easier to fix because it's not a complete overhaul of paragraphs 2 through 4. No one wants to do that.
Very true.
No one's got time for that either. Let's be honest.
Since you work so intensively and intentionally on writing and teaching teachers and students, how has this work shaped your own relationship with writing?
Yeah, it's really brought so much purpose for me in what I get to do. I feel so grateful that my sphere of influence has grown, and I take that very seriously. And it also, I love that Steve Jobs said, you can't connect the dots in your life looking forward. It's only in looking back. And I just, this all started for me in 8th grade. My mom was my U.S. history teacher, and she put up a writing prompt on the board, and she said, look, it's going to be a grade. So everyone has to do it. She said, but one of you might win $100 because it's also the competition that the veterans of foreign wars are putting on. And the prompt was, write about what democracy means to you. So I worked on my essay like I should. My mom's my teacher. She's going to get me if I don't. So I turned it in, and I ended up winning. And all my friends, of course, said it was rigged, and it wasn't. We didn't have any connection to the VFW in Laurel, Mississippi. I promise. So when I won that $100, it's like in the movie Inside Out, where Riley has all those core memories, and so many memories connected to those core ones. And that was it for me. That is a core memory to this day, that I just remember thinking, if I won $100 for working on this essay for 3 hours, first of all, that's an amazing hourly rate of pay. Secondly, what else is out there? And that prompted me to look for scholarships all through high school. And that is just truly what makes all of this make sense. That when I go into classrooms, I see myself in that desk, and what a gift and incredible opportunity writing can be for students to write, yes, obviously to write, but to work on assignments, to find those scholarships, to find their voice, to process their feelings, to just better make sense of even the content that they're learning. And so that's where I feel it has really stayed with me and shaped me, is that I want every student, no matter their grade, to feel that core memory get formed, if I can in any way help with that around writing and its power, and also its doability, that it is something we all can learn how to do well.
I love it. And even with this day and age, where a lot of things are changing technology-wise and just socially-wise, especially with the major rise of AI.
Yeah.
So students, they are writing constantly. They're texting, they're Instagramming, they're writing AI prompts in ChatGPT. They're doing all types of things, but not always thoughtfully. So how does Writing with Design address writing in this digital first age, especially like our middle schoolers and high schoolers?
Oh, yes. That's a truly fabulous question. I'm in schools that have a complete ban on AI to schools that don't even have a policy at all. And so I think we need to find a better place than either of those two extremes. And so what I encourage schools, or anyone who's working with people who have capacity to get onto AI, right, which is just about all of us now, that there needs to be an understanding that anything written is subject to a verbal follow-up. And that has been a game changer for middle and high schoolers, because I don't think if we take a hard and fast stance and say you may not use AI at all, that they are going to say, okay, you're right, I shouldn't. And you have my word. And not that that's not a slight on middle and high schoolers. I think that's a disservice to them, because it is here and it's not leaving, and it's only going to become more a part of all of the professions that exist, that get replaced, right? That their AI is now, it is you and AI in terms of who you are in any kind of job form, right? Because AI is an incredible tool for efficiency, for learning all the options, for getting over a moment you're stuck on. And so what I would encourage all students and writers to do is to be very specific with the questions that you're putting into AI. Not write me an essay or write me a poem or whatever the prompt is. I mean, that's an abuse of AI, full stop. But to say, okay, here's where I am, right? I'm writing a report on the Egyptian god Horus. So happens to be what my 6th grade son's working on. And he's stuck on one part about who the family members were for Horus. He's read different sources and they say different things. And he came to me and said, I don't know which one is right. And so that was a wonderful opportunity to head on to one of our AI platforms and just say, I've read both of these. Here are the sources I've used. Help me figure out why I'm getting different information. And through that analysis and that explanation, he was able to say, oh, it actually is a discrepancy. There's two different competing versions of the story. So I'm going to put that into my writing. So it helped him not get stuck and overwhelmed in that moment, but to know how to then move forward with it in his writing. I use it a lot when I say, okay, these are my the three things I'm thinking about for what I want to do with teachers in the next training, or and I use it for idea generation. But I don't just let it give me one. I say I want your top 5, and then from there, it's back to me, where my creativity, my knowledge, my expertise comes back into play. So I think if it is used to enhance your ideas and then boomerang it back to you, that's a wonderful use of AI. If it is a pushing off to AI to get it done for you, that's where it can become a really slippery slope and really become something that I think you have to continually gauge and make sure that you are not losing your own understanding and knowledge of it. And so I think that's a really, I think, important checkpoint for students, that number one, to know there's a policy of anything I turn in is subject to a verbal follow-up. So I better be able to cover that I know what's in my paper, right? And then secondly, to really teach how to use it to be a boomerang back to you, to take something you're thinking of, give you some ideas, give you something so that you're not stuck, and move on, and then come back to you where it's back on your brain and back on your ideas coming forward.
Love it. So making AI a tool exactly how it should be. There's nothing more.
Right. It is a tool. Do I think AI is going to replace writers? No, absolutely not. Absolutely not. I think more than anything, it is making that the humanness something that we all crave more, in terms of I have found that I'm getting more responses from schools wanting in-person sessions, not even virtual sessions, because they want that 3D version, right? Or 4D, right? They want us to be right there, all together, and not just something that feels artificial, that feels like it could be just generated by some technology source. They want to know the person and the heart behind it. And that's something that AI will never have, right? It's not going to have our hearts. It's not going to have that ability to connect with people. And that's something that writers do through their words. We do that in person. We do that when we're doing our writings read aloud, and we're doing that through the way that we put together our books and then connect with our audiences and connect with those who have found solace or entertainment or motivation in our words. So I think more than anything, AI is going to elevate the profession and the power that it takes to be a writer, because of the utilization of the tool to further our own thinking and creativity. I think AI has made me a better writer. I don't think it's taken away from what I do at all, but it definitely has elevated my thinking, the way I process, challenged me on the way I am putting together even a sentence, right? To say, here's 2 other structures for that sentence. Which one do you think sounds better, right? It's all in that processing and programming that we all have the power to do with our AI bots to help us really, not bots, but just our AI platforms to help us really get better at our own craft.
I love that question. I think you're the first person I've heard to say that it's going to elevate the profession. I was like, usually I get the opposite. So it's a breath of fresh air for that one.
Yeah. Yes, I think with anything new, right, it can feel so scary, right? I mean, when the internet first was developed, right, there was such a fear that it was going to to really lead to such misinformation and just this kind of no more use for schools or for education, or everything's going to be online and we won't need to go anywhere anymore. And it hasn't. It's elevated our connection. It's elevated the way that we can work together. It's given us an opportunity to connect and do this podcast, for example. And so I think anytime there's newness, anytime we don't have, we're going into an unknown, it does feel scary and it does feel threatening. And I think more than anything, though, we have to model great use of it. We have to teach our students how to use it well. And for writers, I do truly feel like it's going to make it more of a human art and skill set rather than, the book my AI just wrote for me. Nobody wants to read that. I don't want to read that mess. I want to know Destiny wrote it, right? I want to know the person. I want to have that human connection to the work rather than something that just got spewed out because of a computer code.
That's true. Oh my gosh, Amber, we're going to have to have you back on the show. That we're running out of time. So we are going to be hitting our fire round.
Oh, let's do it.
So first thing that comes to mind. The first question is, for young writers and creatives listening, what is one piece of advice you would give them on their creative journey?
Read a lot of phenomenal books. Study the authors. Study what they're doing. Ask yourself how they do that, how they put that sentence together, how they put that paragraph together, how they put those chapters together. What is one nugget I can take from each piece of writing that I read, whether it's the driest research report you're reading or the juiciest novel? It doesn't matter. Read and study the structure. Read like a writer.
I like that. All right. What book do you recommend for writers or creatives to read?
Oh gosh. That's a really fantastic question. Well, I would. Oh, let me grab it. Yeah, Best Practices in Writing Instruction. It's right here for me. It's a Steve Graham book, of course. So I'm going to recommend his phenomenal work. This is just an incredible kind of just encyclopedia, basically, of all the writing research that's been done on how to teach kids to write. And it's just an absolute guidepost of how to teach writing.
Awesome. And most important question, where can people connect with you and the work that you do?
Yeah, so we're on all the socials. So LinkedIn is one of my favorites to be on and to connect with people. So definitely would recommend that one. Facebook and Instagram are the other two, I guess, main social platforms that I'm on. And then we also have writingwithdesign.com. So that's our website. There's a contact place on there as well. So I'm always just a couple clicks away that way. And then certainly through all the platforms, would love to stay connected. We do have a YouTube channel as well, just Writing with Design. And we have lots of videos on there that just are supportive of writing instruction. We can get on there and vent a little bit sometimes about things that we see and the issues that we see going on in schools and instruction. And then we even have some drawing videos. So that's something really helpful if you have littles or work with littles or just want to get better at drawing things. We have very simple videos. They're all silent, but they just walk you through steps of drawing the simplest version of a couch, for example. Like, how do you take something 3D and turn it into 2D on your paper? And so our videos will help with the steps to do that.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Amber, for being on the show today. And I hope you get a chance to come back on the show to tell us some more good stuff about writing.
Yes, I would love it. Thanks, Destiny.
Thank you for listening to Pen by Design. All links and resources will be in the show notes below. Keep on writing, writers, and I'll see you next time.